Hey,
I, I was muted.
that's good. That's okay. How's it going?
Going good. How about you?
Yeah, I'm all right.
Let's see.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Hello. Good morning.
I'm getting coffee, grab it.
Pretty chill party.
What's this?
I was just saying, pretty chill party. We are all just hanging silently, sitting. Yeah, so, yeah. I did have like one topic. I think Sartas is adding one as well.
Are we good to start?
Yeah,
Do you want to go with your topic, Jay?
yeah. Yeah, so this is regarding the PR that I have open already for like revamping the PubSub system. And I was wondering while we are at it, like, should we update the audit connection and audit channel flag as well? So, like, I think me and Short has have been commenting on that on the PR. So I wanted your opinion as well, Max. And then I was thinking if we want to get rid of those flags altogether, that is also possible. And that opens the doorway to support multiple connections. And if not, then I was wondering about the suggestions to how to appropriately name them because they are only used in audit right now. Uh,
Yeah, I think, didn't we have some discussion about this in terms of like whether we should specify or whether basically like so it's possible to specify publishing an event on as like a enforcement point specific enforcement action, right? But there was also, if I remember right, the counterpoint that we didn't necessarily want to require users to put that specification in there if what they wanted to do was just like wholesale publish violations.
hmm.
Uh, is this like a naming discussion for in the commentary?
Both, both like naming, or should we also like modify this? Do we need to modify this basically? And if not, then definitely naming, obviously.
Yeah, we still need to get rid of config maps, but let's see, gatekeeper system, one gatekeeper exporter config, yes.
Once we have the CRDs, we can remove these, right? This is just
Yeah,
a, yeah.
you're talking about flags or
The
config.
flags, the audit connection, and then the audit. What was that?
Uh,
Uh,
audit.
the,
If we add that config fields on CRD itself, then we can remove it. Otherwise, there's some way that user needs to specify like which connection to use, right? Like or
Right.
which object to use.
and conversely, if they specify, if they're able to specify the channel that the channel receives audit events in the channel config, then permissions to create a channel config are equivalent to permissions to view every violation. Right. So basically, you could snoop on the cluster. That's worth considering. Um, and so we're just looking at renaming these right now, not necessarily dealing with multiple connections, right? Because another option could be to refactor these to accept lists of connections
Yeah,
value. I mean, the first, I think, most important point is just like the personas consideration, right? Like, are we okay with the idea that configuring a connection is equivalent to being able to snoop on all violations, or does there need to be a separation because we think different parties, like basically an administrator may want to delegate the ability to create these connections. Uh, I don't have like an immediate answer off the top of my head. Like flag is obviously like the safer or the more conservative approach in that respect. Yeah, I don't know. Does anyone have strong feelings on that consideration?
Yeah, I think only thing is like if we rename this one, we'll have to remove it later on. So it's kind of like the users get broken twice, sort of.
Well, but that's the question: is do we remove it later on, right? Because the first question is like, do we need to separate the ability to specify a connection from the ability to listen on all violations?
But so let's say, like in future, even when we support multiple connections and we make it a list, there, what is the scope of adding one more connection to like export violation, right? Because flags values are static when at the start of pod, and then you
Mhm.
need to restart in order to have the connection added. Is it the
Correct.
user experience we want?
I mean, we could always create like a different CR, but I think we're maybe getting we're maybe overthinking things at that point, right? Like how often are people completely revamping their connections? And bear in mind, like you could still edit the connection object. Um, so yeah, it, and like modifying a flag, like it requires you to restart Gatekeeper, but you do that when upgrading Gatekeeper anyway. So as long as the operation isn't too common, like it's not that huge of a cost.
I feel like
Like
these are different
honestly,
users, right?
what's that?
I feel like these are different users. Like people who use a flag are definitely different from people who use a CRD, I guess.
Right, and that was kind of my point, is
Mhm.
that if hey, this connection listens on all violations is a sensitive operation, the ability to modify gatekeeper flags is like the most sensitive permission in gatekeeper. So it's a if we want to keep them separate, that's a definitely a viable candidate.
Right. But if you want to introduce these changes without having to restart Gatekeeper, then having it as a flag is not good then.
Yeah, I mean, there's solutions for that, but how often are people editing their like universal pub sub sync?
What are the roles of like constraint authors versus people like users who create connections? I'm wondering if constraint authors have the ability to specify that these violations should only be exported to these connections. Can we work around the issue where CRD, like CRD, the person who has access to CRD for creating connection can get all the violation?
I think you're just moving the problem around at that point, right? Because then constraint authors can also like hide their violations from uh, the pub sub queue. Um, so it's who has which problematic permission. Um, yeah, and just to like clarify the attack here, right? Let's say you have, if you wanted to exfiltrate all secrets from a cluster, right? What you could do is you could create a uh, a, a, a warn only, or not even a dry run constraint that just publishes the content of every resource that's requested against it, right? And normally that would like not be that sensitive of a risk because okay, no, but if you had a pre-existing connection, you could still do this regardless of um, whether you had the global publishing or not, because at that point you're authoring the constraint. So really, the difference here would be that okay, yeah, no, and maybe the solution there is just to like use RBAC, right, or some other kind of validation. You could use validating admission policy to sort of enforce whether that field gets set. That's kind of a meta thought, but
This is literally the cap I'm working on for DRA.
was it?
Literally the cap I'm working on right now for the DRA feature in Kubernetes. Basically have some way to ensure only certain privileged users can set a field on a custom resource, basically. But in this case, I think we're in the same boat because we're saying, hey, let's use VAP for that. And obviously that will require the VAP to be in the cluster, right, all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I don't necessarily know if I'm saying specific user. Like you could do a state-based policy, right? Only this specific endpoint can have that field set, right? And that could also be like audited. But you'd still need some system to do that enforcement, and so either gatekeeper is eating its own tail or something like that. RBAC, you could just straight up prevent only everyone but trusted people from touching it, but then obviously you're limited.
Well, VAP is not RBAC, so there's that.
Right. Well, I mean, what I'm saying is they're two different solutions, right? Like either you only have trusted people doing a thing, in which case you're sort of limited in how much you could delegate, or you're doing like state-based validation, in which case, like, it's kind of a free-for-all. Like as long as people express an allowed thing, they can express it. But then you need something to do that enforcement. VAP is omnipresent or will be eventually.
So is PubSub a feature that we only want the gatekeeper admin to do?
But so, sorry, Rita, I have one more question. Like even right now, whoever has access to constraint can export those violation, or at least what's visible, right?
Yeah, that was when I sort of like shot my own argument in the foot a couple of minutes ago, where I was like, oh wait, but yeah, if they wanted to create a malicious constraint that exports everything, like they could just like specify the pub sub manually. So at that point, really the question is, do you trust pub sub authors at all? Because that's the any kind of like access to a remote data store, because you could do this with HTTP requests as well, right? External data, that kind of thing. Anyone who's capable of specifying any kind of external connection is capable of like exporting violation and request information.
Sorry, Rita. I got my answer. Go ahead.
No, I was just trying to understand, like, I think the way it's currently designed, right, is whoever has access to create that config map can basically define the connection stuff, right? The configs for the
But yeah.
I think it's like becoming a little clearer to me, like from a consistency point of view. This is external data, right? It's like equally as risky. So and we've already kind of like chosen our model for external data. So we may as well just like be consistent about that, and so users can take a uniform approach to locking things down.
So what are you proposing?
Oh, I'm going to JDIP's side, right? Like, so the idea behind external data was, well, if you have a CRD, you can limit who can specify what connections, and then sort of just assume that you're reaching out to trusted systems, and you're less concerned about constraint contents. I think the same thing can be said of pub sub connections, right? Like, as long as only trusted people can specify those connections, then you're less worried about exporting data to a malicious sink, right? And you could have like other protections at the sink level, right? In terms of like making sure that you're doing whatever anonymization or whatever you're wanting to do before people touch the raw data.
And today, that's whoever has access to the gatekeeper system namespace.
Right, and tomorrow what it would be is whoever has access to this custom resource that we create, exactly the same way as like external data. So so the security model is then the same, and so then they're not like taking two different approaches to lock down two different parts of the project, and so everything is like a bit more streamlined.
I'm trying to think of corner cases.
There is also this thing, like if somebody creates too many connections, that's kind of DDoS attack, because now audit is busy reporting those stuff rather than auditing.
Yeah, but in the case where it's already only trusted people making these things, then you're sort of conceding that this is a squishy center, and you need a crunchy shell around it.
Yeah, I mean, whoever creating this needs to have access to the gatekeeper system, right? So that's like pretty trustworthy, I guess.
I mean, so we should talk in custom resource world, not config map world. So it's stronger than gatekeeper system, right? They would need permissions for the specific resource.
Yeah, explicitly granted. Yeah.
So does this leave room for improvement on the later part if we ever get to where we want like a loosely coupled connection between constraint and uh, connections to generate like publishing queues for different personas?
I think it's orthogonal, right? Like you could do that by putting like a label value or like a set of group values in the connection resource, for instance. And yeah, you could do that regardless. Although if you wanted to have a sensitive group, right, in a model where we're doing something different, like requiring modifying a flag for sensitive operations, then it's not clear what the solution is. So yeah, this unblocks that story in that sense, right? Because we're defining all things around naming and defining pub sub as sensitive operations. So it's trivial to extend that trust to classifying the pub sub connection as well.
So do we do we want to get rid of it, or do we not want to get rid of it?
Sorry, which was obvious. So my thought would be like if we're doing the resource thing, then we get rid of the and we're specifying the like this is an audit, this is an audit results sync or whatever sort of granularity, right? Do we want to also sync webhook results? Then yeah, we get rid of the flag, right? Because why would we keep it? But if people
Just to clarify, which flag are we getting rid of?
Audit connection and audit channel.
Okay, and then just have everything set in the CRD within the CRD, the provider, not the provider, the driver CRD.
Yeah, and just to be anal, CR, but yeah.
A CR, yes.
Sorry.
No, usually I'm the one that's doing that. Okay. I guess ultimately the gatekeeper admin has like control over if they are allowed you to use the feature or not. So there's always that feature flag. And if you opt in, then you're like, okay, I'm okay signing up for this, like roll your own pub sub thing. So
And you're okay with accepting the responsibility of locking down RBAC around it.
that's right. Yeah. I mean, same goes with the external data. Yeah.
Yeah, actually 100% because you could disable the feature.
Yeah.
Or
exactly.
yeah.
I'm just trying to think. I feel like this has a higher attack surface than external data. Is that true?
Attack surface, no. Attack capability, maybe.
Because this is
Right.
like the whole cluster data that you can offload. I guess I could do that with the external data too.
Yeah, what's unique here is you can also get a sense of how other requests are interacting with policies that you did not author. Right, like external data requires you to author both a malicious connection and presumably a malicious constraint template, and then probably a malicious constraint. This, if you wanted to exfiltrate all request contents, you would probably need to have a malicious constraint and template. But if all you're interested in is like, what is the control surface? What are the specific policies? Can I sniff them out? Then you can just create a pub sub connection, right? And just like hook into that data. I mean, it's technically more powerful than exfiltrating all data, but in practice, I don't know how useful it would be to get like the sort of already sort of the violations that you're getting, like what are from normal constraints, what are you going to do with them, right, that you couldn't already do by just dumping the entire cluster.
At worst, you are getting like names and resource name and why they are in violation of what resource.
Exactly, compared with getting all of like everything, right, because audits everything.
So external data is actually worse, yeah, because you're getting the whole request. You could send the whole request basically.
Yeah, and you could with PubSub too. Yeah. I guess the one thing that's different here is that if users decided, hey, the person who can author policy content must be different from the person who can author like a connection configuration. PubSub, you can exfiltrate data with connection configuration alone, right? Like you don't need that union, so it's harder to strictly separate those two properties at that point. But I mean, that's just if you want to be able to specify like a universal sync, that's just kind of the nature of it, right? So if we want to have a global sync, then this is the trade-off we have to make. And if we're not okay with that trade-off, well, then how much do we want the global sync? So I would kind of say, like, if users aren't comfortable with that trade-off themselves, that feature can still be disabled entirely.
So sounds like Max, you are agreeing on removing those flags.
I mean, once there's a custom resource, yeah, that's my thought.
Okay. So right now we don't want to rename flags, and then when we have CRD, we just altogether remove them uh, in order to not break user twice, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't care about renaming the flags one direction or another, right? They're alpha. So, like, users expect instability, they expect jank. So, it's which kind of jank or instability you want to introduce. Weird name or needing to reconfigure stuff. All the same to me.
Were you able to think of any edge cases, Rita, that would break stuff? I'm curious.
I definitely don't like if it's just like a config map. I feel like then you're giving like the gatekeeper namespace admin a lot of power, sort of.
Oh yeah, like config map needs
Yeah.
to go away for so many.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about edge cases. So
There's also the watch issue with config map.
Yeah.
So I think config map was just like a temporary solution.
Sure,
until
sure,
making-
We already discussed the design and like we had discussions around CRD and stuff. I'll link the design doc again if you guys want to refresh the memory. But I think we pretty much decided that we want a namespace called CRD uh, there, and then I'll share the design doc again, just so that you guys can get it refreshed. But we have those things logged in as well, pretty much.
And so, any other edge cases you're thinking?
Maybe more thinking needed.
So do we agree that we don't want to rename these flags here, like audit connection and audit channel so far, and then we can just remove them altogether? I mean, Max doesn't have any opinion on that, so I'm asking you and Sartash if you guys have some opinions on changing things.
Yeah, I personally prefer to make the change on the flags after the CRD is introduced. That's just me.
Okay.
So keep the audit channel and what was it, Roman? I keep forgetting.
Audit connection.
Audit connection. And then remove them or change them when we have the CRDs.
Yeah.
I mean, remove, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Otherwise, we would break the users twice. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we just
Cool.
need to say, hey, this is temporary, and then this will go away once we have the CRDs.
I'm good. Thanks.
Cool. I think you have the other topic too, but it's
Yeah,
just
I added the OPA V1 one. Yeah, so I have the two PRs to bump the OPA V1 with Rego V0 as we discussed. This is the non-intrusive thing that I don't think anybody had any objections. And then yeah, Jay tested with the library. So I think everything passes. Oh, and then this changes to 110 actually. So yeah, please take a look at it when you get a chance.
I started to look at it. I actually tagged Charlie and Anders on the question about V1 using the V1 imports. I know so Charlie opened a PR, right? To upgrade to OPA V1 and to support both version of the Rego. So I added that comment in your PR. My personal preference is let's get yours merged and then bump to V1 import and then test again to make sure everything still works. And then we look at Charlie's PR that supports both, because supporting both will introduce like different user experience, right? Like new user experience. And the nice thing about that is if something breaks, at least we can roll back. Yeah.
Charlie has a PR that supports both.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a draft PR in frameworks.
So remember there was an issue somebody opened up to support V1, right? So in that issue, it's actually in the agenda if you want. Let me just paste it in the chat if it's easier. But this is where I was asking are there actual use cases where they really need V1? And I think the general comment was, users will probably want to try it and they'll want to use it because that's the direction it's going. And then the open docs will start using only V1 regos, so it might be confusing for V0 people. This is Anders' comment, which I thought made sense.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at the PR. This makes sense. I like that he's putting a version marker in the targets thing. I would probably sort of use this as a forcing function to get people to move to the alternative place, because Rego is a top level field versus when we have VAP, now we have I forget what we called it, like source or something like that, and then it was like engine Rego, engine
Yeah.
VAP. We could put the version at that level,
Sure.
and if it's at the top level, just assume Rego V0.
Yeah, we could do that. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm like blanking out on that too. But yeah, so like below Rego, like you could specify V1 basically, right? Something like that.
Yeah, and then just make it really lean into the sort of pluggable engine stuff.
So yeah, so it's code engine. So we could do code engine.
And then V1 would be like a sibling of engine, probably.
Okay, yeah, so let me just put it in the chat. Or actually, let me put it in the, what do you call it? In the, what do you call it? In the meeting notes. Here. So this is Rego, right?
Like capabilities we've done. Okay, nice. Target code engine source. Yeah. Oh, sorry, no, well, it might be an under source. Yeah, it is, because I think the way we have it written right now, every entry in the code list is a strict schema, and then the engine gets to define the schema for source. But basically, the Rego engine would define a version field.
Yeah, this sucks.
Yeah, Charlie's example, the old one, the Rego, not the source one. So it'll be one level down, right?
Yeah, or a few levels down, right? Like, let's see, I'll take a look at what's being typed here.
Really hard to open this without my browser crashing.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
no.
Exactly.
The meeting notes doc?
No, the GitHub here.
There's a lot of files.
Yeah, there's a lot of files.
Oh yeah, he added a version below target.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the old way.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, we can hack it out on the PR, but I think, yeah, since that is a work in progress, we should definitely work with Charlie on that.
But so the question is, we need to modify what Charlie is modifying anyways, right? Like we need, like some people just don't use that uh, source field and then directly mention Rego here.
Well, that's the old way. We don't want to touch the really old way. We don't want to touch that, right? The new way is engine source, remember?
Yeah, but like
Yeah.
since the old way already exists,
Mhm.
we want V1 support there as well, right? Or no?
Nope.
We don't. We want the old way to stay on V0, right?
Okay,
If we add V1, it would be on the new way, like the
okay.
new engine source way.
And then we explicitly say that if you wanna use the V1 syntax, then do this
Yeah, exactly.
specific.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But
Got
what about the default one? Will we default to V0?
Yeah. Yeah, that way, like, old constraint templates still work, but users have a reason
Yeah, I
to.
don't want to update existing stuff.
Yeah, I think that's the tricky part of it, right?
I mean, not really, like, because if people are touching, if they're updating to V1 Rego, they're touching
We're
the
doing it
constraint.
implicitly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if you don't
Right,
provide it, it defaults to V0. If you
right,
override it,
right.
then we will respect that.
But how would we ever go to V1 as a default?
We wouldn't.
Yeah, you would need to update the um like the constraint template version,
Right.
or we would need to create some way, because engines are pluggable, and that's kind of a unique situation here. Come up with a story for how to do that.
Yeah. I'm more thinking like if they ever pull the plug on V0, what
Mhm.
would we do?
I mean, then we're screwed in a lot of different ways. Um, so like the first answer would be uh probably not upgrade OPA for as long as we can to avoid users um needing to modify all their constraint templates, and frankly to avoid us needing to modify all the library constraint templates. And then probably like and who's to say what the situation looks like in terms of like the ecosystem, but probably use that opportunity to try to nudge users into whatever we think is going to be stable, right? Like, and there I'm like looking at VAP, because VAP has already undergone, like, it's already subject to Kubernetes backwards compatibility requirements, right? So that's like a pretty safe bet um, for our purposes. That they won't break our CRD either, right? Because they're not going to break their own. But then, that leaves other questions like external data and referential constraints and all of that. So it would still be messy. And you kind of have to weigh, do you want to like avoid some upfront development costs and just upgrade to Rego V1, but then take the cost of migration across all the community? Or do you want to take probably a higher development cost internally and like fill in those feature gaps? Everyone still needs to migrate, but at least you have a story as to why they'll only need to do this the once. um, and as I said, like all of that is kind of like making assumptions about the state of the world when or if this happens. Does that like tell me if you like disagree with anything I'm said?
Yeah, no, I mean it's definitely tricky. I think we need to like cross that bridge when we get to it. But
Yeah, and
I
I
don't
hope it's
disagree.
not. I hope it's not something that happens like without a lot of warning, right? Like if OPA project maintainer says we want to do this, hopefully they will give people enough time. That way we could handle it. If that happens, but right now I don't see that. That we haven't seen that signal, right? So
Yeah. And if they don't give us time, then we're kind of like stuck in the world of, gee, I hope we can patch all the CVEs we get and sort of like earn time that way.
I don't think that's a good.
No, I'm not saying it's a situation we would want to be in, but it's a situation we would be in if and I'm not saying I think they would do this, but if they're just like tomorrow go, oh, V0 is going away.
But I think the fact that we enable the framework to support both V1 and V0 as soon as possible will hopefully give us the runway to go make whatever change necessary. So the sooner we have that, the better, I think. Like, for example, now is like opt-in, right, for V1. If that ever happens, and if they give us enough time to warn us, maybe we'll make it like V0 opt-in, like if we have to deal with this.
We potentially mitigate the damage, right? Especially if we encourage people to use Rego V1. There's still pre-existing constraint templates, and there's still like a breaking of backwards compatibility. So I don't like disagree with you entirely, but it doesn't like solve the risk. And it is not in and of itself a solution to the risk, but it does like lower the risk.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Are we good with this topic? Okay. I don't think there's anything else, right?
No, that's the last one.
Okay. All right, you get 5 minutes back.
It's good to see everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.